to continue to be better partners, continue to be more engaged, and respond when they call for help and address violent criminal activity.
Director Seralto, I'm going to interrupt myself. I appreciate the work that you and the Marshal Service do to keep federal judges safe, but there's thousands of state and local judges who don't have the same intelligence network, the same resources. I'm proud to co-sponsor a bill with Senator John Cornyn that would create a new state judicial threat intelligence and resource center. It would provide security assessments for local courts and help local law enforcement make assessments about how to keep judges' homes safe and how to keep court personnel safe. It's passed the Senate unanimously. Do you have any opinion about whether or not—
Senator Coons.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Moran, Ranking Member Van Hollen, Senator Murkowski, and I appreciate each of our witnesses for being here today. During National Police Week, I just wanted to express my particular appreciation for the men and women of each of your agencies. When I was county executive, I was responsible for the second largest law enforcement agency in our state, and our partnerships with Marshals, ATF, DEA, FBI, and many other elements of federal law enforcement were really critical to our investigations and working to advance security in my home community. In just the last few months, the Newcastle County Police have worked with the FBI to arrest a suspect who had both plans and weapons to carry out a mass shooting at the University of Delaware. Worked with DEA to investigate methamphetamine distributors. Worked with the Marshal Service to arrest a suspect with a warrant out for attempted murder. These are just a few brief examples. I have other topics to get to, but if each of you could just briefly tell me, what are your plans for strengthening your partnerships with local law enforcement, and what more do you need from Congress to execute on those plans? Director Patel.
Thank you, Senator. One thing we always need more of is data from state and local. Anything we can do from a legislative perspective at the federal state level to get us that data so we can ingest the data and get it back out to our partners, that's critical. What we're doing to expand specifically at the FBI, for the first time ever, we stood up our LEPIC, our Law Enforcement Partner Engagement Council. So I didn't want to just hear from police officers from around the country by email and phone call. I embedded 10 officers and sheriffs and tribal officers permanently at the FBI because they're the best connected. And so for us, that's the best way forward, along with getting out into the field and making sure our field partners see and feel us and touch us and tell us what their problems are.
Thank you, Director.
Senator, more connectivity to our state, local, and tribal partners is the utmost importance at DEA. Due with the significant change in the landscape with synthetic opioids, with more methamphetamine pills coming in, more cocaine coming in, it's important that those state and local counterparts, the men and women that are on the front lines every single day, have the same intelligence and the same information that the DEA does. Part of this is coming from our capacity to build foreign partnerships. The amount of foreign partnerships and people we have downrange in Mexico and Colombia, that intel is critical to the beat officer that's working in rural areas. So we have to continue to be better partners, continue to be more engaged, and respond when they call for help and address violent criminal activity.
Director Seralto, I'm going to interrupt myself. I appreciate the work that you and the Marshal Service do to keep federal judges safe, but there's thousands of state and local judges who don't have the same intelligence network, the same resources. I'm proud to co-sponsor a bill with Senator John Cornyn that would create a new state judicial threat intelligence and resource center. It would provide security assessments for local courts and help local law enforcement make assessments about how to keep judges' homes safe and how to keep court personnel safe. It's passed the Senate unanimously. Do you have any opinion about whether or not the House should take it up and whether or not partnering with state and local court systems would help advance judicial security in this country?
Senator, thank you. Thank you for your work on that. My opinion will be is that any judge that we can keep safe, whether it be in state or the federal bench, we should keep safe. To that end, I'll tell you, judges make decisions that are life-changing, sometimes to themselves. So 50% of the time, someone is upset with the judge's decision, right? Yep. Whether they win or lose. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. The justices, judges, the judiciary are the pillars of our country.
I look forward to working with you on protecting and promoting judicial security. Director Patel, Reauthorization of Section 702 is something I've previously grappled with, but we've not heard at all from officials from the FBI or the other intelligence agencies testifying about the proposed 18-month clean extension. Were you invited by Chairman Grassley to testify before our committee about Section 702?
What I recall, Senator, is that we in the FBI team have been providing briefings pursuant to the chairman's request. So we've done at least a dozen in the Senate and at least half a dozen or more in the House, including myself and Director Ratcliffe personally.
Okay. I have not participated in or benefited from any of those briefings. And doing oversight on the reforms that were put in place and how closely they're being followed is critical to my concluding whether or not I'll vote for an extension. Director, I have to ask you one last question. You attended the Olympics in Milan. How much did your trip cost, and to what extent did that help you carry out your mission as director of the FBI?
I greatly appreciate the question, Senator. As you know, the FBI and DHS are responsible for the security of the Olympics, the World Cup, the F1, the Super Bowl, and everything else. We had 250,000 Americans travel to Milan. We're proud that we stood up our jock there and had 0 major security incidents involving American citizens. And what we did was we purposely planned that trip around the Olympics because, as I mentioned in my opening, the top cyber criminal from the CCP was housed in Italian custody. While there, we were able to work an agreement, an arrangement to have that individual expelled from Italy instead of going back to China, like has so often happened in places like Serbia. Mm-hmm. And so we accomplished that mission, and we kept it quiet, and that individual was returned to America 2 weeks ago.
I was concerned that just before we went to war with Iran, a whole group of FBI agents were terminated, about 10, who were reportedly analysts with expertise in handling Iranian counterterrorism, fluent in Farsi, long experienced. I know there's ongoing litigation, but have you replaced them? Was there a reason for their dismissal? Do we have the capabilities we need to protect the United States while there's an ongoing war in Iran? The public reporting as to the reasons for their dismissal I found deeply troubling.
Well, as I've addressed earlier, I don't believe the public reporting is accurate. What we did do for the first time in FBI history is stand up the Iran Threats Mission Center that is housed inside the FBI with our Iran experts, including intelligence and analysts and agents, and we have seen a 47% increase in the arrest of Iranian spies.
Do you disagree that there were 10 Iran specialists dismissed right before the war began?
Yes.
Senator Hegseth.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Pull up a chair and look closely at the screen, because this transcript from the Senate Armed Services Committee is a remarkable piece of legislative oversight from May 2026. What we are breaking down today isn't just a disagreement over a single military strike. This is a fundamental debate over executive planning, global readiness, and the actual cost of what the administration calls a completed war. We are watching Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii go directly after Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Schatz isn't trying to argue about whether the U.S. military can win a fight. He explicitly acknowledges that the American armed forces are the most technologically advanced and disciplined fighting machine in human history. Instead, he is pulling back the curtain on the logistical reality after the bombs dropped, exposing what looks like a frantic, global scramble to clean up the mess left behind by Operation Midnight Hammer. Let's lay down the educational framework for this dispute. Schatz structures his argument by comparing historical intelligence with real-world, post-engagement logistics. He references a 2019 Defense Intelligence Agency report that explicitly warned everyone about Iran's playbook: asymmetric swarm tactics, thousands of naval mines, and a dense inventory of anti-ship cruise missiles designed specifically to block the Strait of Hormuz. He then brings the receipts from a 2025 Brookings Institution analysis published right after Operation Midnight Hammer. That analysis warned that despite taking heavy conventional damage, Iran was far from a defeated nation. Their missile tech had already shown it could penetrate complex integrated air defense systems across the region, putting every single U.S. base in the Persian Gulf in immediate peril. Schatz's core question is simple. If the Pentagon knew this was Iran's exact play, why did the actual aftermath look like an unmitigated emergency? Look at the evidence Schatz drops at the 1-minute mark, and this is a detail that should make anyone studying global strategy sit up straight. Schatz reveals that after the kinetic phase of the war ended, the Pentagon began pulling elements of the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, and Patriot missile batteries out of South Korea and rushing them into the Middle East. At the exact same time, munition stockpiles were being systematically drained from U.S. bases around the world and airlifted to the Gulf to protect American installations that were suddenly under fire. Schatz notes that despite all the talk of a flawless plan, there was a desperate rush to evacuate U.S. personnel, and Iran still managed to strike over 200 structures and pieces of equipment across 16 different American sites in the region. Schatz is looking at Hegseth and asking, if your plan was so great, why are we stripping defenses from our allies in Asia to cover our backs in the Middle East after you declared victory? Now, look at Pete Hegseth's counter-strategy. Hegseth leans entirely into the primary objective narrative of the 2026 Trump administration. He doesn't deny that assets were moved. Instead, he argues that everything was accounted for by the Joint Staff and civilian leadership because it served one clear, non-negotiable strategic goal: ensuring that Iran never obtains a usable nuclear weapon. Hegseth's argument is that you cannot evaluate the success of an operation by looking at local friction points like a reshuffled missile battery. You have to look at the macro achievement. In his view, destroying Iran's defense industrial base and sinking their conventional navy was the prize, and any logistical scrambling afterward was simply standard operational branches and sequels. But watch how Schatz cuts right through that defense. He brings up a massive political contradiction. He points out that while Hegseth is sitting in a Senate hearing claiming everything went exactly according to script, the commander-in-chief himself went on television and expressed shock that Iran would retaliate by striking neighboring countries and asymmetric targets. Schatz states bluntly, "You don't need to get into a classified skiff to understand that this was their likely play." To Schatz, this looks like classic happy talk and military adventurism. He voices the deep skepticism shared by lawmakers on both the left and the right who are utterly weary of regime change rhetoric and short-sighted conflicts that leave American forces exposed in a permanent state of crisis. This is where the exchange gets incredibly sharp and personal. Hegseth, rather than giving a technical explanation for moving the THAAD systems out of the Indo-Pacific theater, goes on the offensive. He tries to draw a political contrast, bringing up a highly controversial incident from a previous administration where American sailors were detained by Iranian fast boats. He asserts that the military didn't have leadership that empowered them back then, but under the current administration, the Central Command commander was given absolute authority to execute the mission successfully. Hegseth asserts that the administration factored in all the risks and deployed maximum defensive capabilities in real time. But notice what Hegseth doesn't answer. He tells Schatz that there are classified reasons why you sink a navy to prevent a nuclear weapon, hints at deeper operational contingencies, and essentially tells the committee to trust the judgment of the commanders on the ground. Schatz, trying desperately to stick to his allotted time, cuts him off. "I hear what you're saying. I just don't hear an answer to the question." Schatz's point remains the most vital takeaway for anyone analyzing this transcript. If an operation is truly thought out, planned, and well executed, your defensive postures, like your Patriot and THAAD missile batteries, are positioned before the first shot is fired, not scrambled across oceans while your personnel are actively evacuating under fire. By stripping missile infrastructure from South Korea, the US temporarily opened a strategic window of vulnerability in the Indo-Pacific, creating a ripple effect that directly impacts our deterrence posture against other major adversaries in Asia. Ultimately, this 5-minute and 7-second exchange exposes the core ideological split in Washington in 2026. On one hand, you have an administration that views massive, disruptive kinetic action as a successful way to smash a long-term threat, viewing the resulting regional chaos and logistical reallocations as minor details. On the other hand, you have lawmakers like Schatz who look past the immediate battlefield fireworks and look at the structural damage done to global stability, troop safety, and long-term readiness. When Hegseth closes by simply stating he is quite confident that everything possible was done, it highlights a deep institutional divide. The war might be labeled a tactical success on the Pentagon's charts, but as long as US bases are recovering from strikes and critical defense assets are being shuffled around the globe like a shell game, the true strategic cost of Operation Midnight Hammer will remain a matter of intense debate.